He walked into the courtroom with his head held high, but the whispers followed him like shadows. A young black teenager, judged not by his actions, but by the color of his skin. The judge's smirk said it all. This was no place for him, at least in their eyes. Yet behind those quiet eyes was a truth no one in that room was ready for. What happens when prejudice blinds the powerful, and brilliance comes from where they least expect?
Before that fateful day in the courtroom, Marcus's life was one of quiet determination. Growing up in a struggling neighborhood, he was often underestimated, seen only through the lens of stereotypes. With dreadlocks, dark skin, and secondhand clothes, strangers judged him long before he opened his mouth. But behind closed doors, Marcus carried a relentless drive. He devoured books late into the night, studied cases online, and even shadowed community lawyers who saw potential where others saw only doubt. At school, he was known as the quiet genius. Teachers whispered about his sharp mind. Classmates came to him for help. Yet even then, there were moments when his brilliance was overshadowed by prejudice. He was stopped in stores for no reason, watched suspiciously when walking home, and even pulled aside by police who couldn't believe someone like him belonged in advanced classes. Still, Marcus pressed forward. His dream wasn't fame or riches. It was justice. He wanted to prove that knowledge could break barriers, that resilience could silence doubt. And though he never said it aloud, he carried a fire within him, to stand where few expected him to stand, and to show the world what they refused to see. But on this particular morning, when he walked into the courtroom, that dream would be tested in ways he never imagined. The smirks, the whispers, and the stares weren't just background noise. They were the opening notes of a storm about to break. What no one realized was that Marcus wasn't simply there to watch. His role in that courtroom would change everything.
The atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with unspoken judgment. Marcus felt it the moment he stepped forward, eyes scanning him, whispers darting across the room like invisible knives. To most, he wasn't a young man with years of study and preparation behind him. He was just another black teenager in a system that rarely gave second chances. The judge leaned back in his chair, his smirk widening as he adjusted his glasses. "Another one wasting our time," his expression seemed to say, though the words never left his mouth. The spectators chuckled softly, feeding off the tone set by the man in the robe. It was more than disrespect, it was dismissal, the kind that cuts deeper than words ever could. Marcus's heart pounded, but not with fear, with focus. He had seen this before, too many times to count. On the streets, teachers doubted his intelligence. In stores, security guards shadowed his every move. Even when he excelled in academics, the compliments were wrapped in surprise, as if brilliance and his skin color were opposites. And now, in this courtroom, the same narrative played out, only louder, harsher, more public. When Marcus was asked to present, the judge raised his eyebrows, almost laughing at the audacity. "Let's see what this boy thinks he knows." His eyes seemed to sneer. The jury shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to share the ridicule or the unease of the moment. But Marcus spoke with clarity. His voice steady, his arguments sharp. Every word was anchored in logic, every point supported by research he had meticulously memorized. Yet even as he spoke, the interruptions came. Sharp interjections from the judge, dismissive comments from opposing counsel, exaggerated sighs echoing from the gallery. It wasn't just about disproving his case. It was about breaking him down, making him question his place in that very room. The pressure mounted. The more brilliant Marcus revealed himself to be, the harsher the resistance grew. He wasn't supposed to be this smart, this composed, this prepared. To them, He was stepping out of the box they had neatly placed him in, and that was dangerous. Still, he pushed forward. Every insult became fuel, every sneer a reminder of why he stood there. The tension rose with each passing minute, the courtroom divided between those rooting for his failure and those quietly marveling at his resilience. By the time Marcus concluded, silence filled the room. Not admiration, confusion. How could a boy they dismissed so easily dismantle arguments crafted by seasoned professionals? How could someone they ridiculed stand taller than their expectations? And yet, the silence was not the end. It was the pause before the storm. The judge leaned forward, his smirk gone, his face now hardened into something colder. He wasn't impressed. He was threatened. And when men in power feel threatened, they don't yield easily. The question wasn't whether Marcus had proven himself. He had. The real question was, how far would prejudice go to tear him back down?
The judge's gavel slammed against the bench, echoing like thunder across the silent courtroom. His face was no longer amused. It was hardened with something far sharper, resentment. Marcus had done the unthinkable. He had stood toe-to-toe with professionals and held his ground. And in that moment, the courtroom shifted. No longer was he the boy they dismissed at first glance. He was a force they could not ignore. But instead of recognition, the backlash came swift and cruel. The judge's words cut deep, each syllable dripping with contempt. He called Marcus arrogant, accused him of disrespect, and hinted that his presence was nothing more than a spectacle. Every statement was designed not to critique his arguments, but to strip away his dignity. The gallery followed the lead. Some smirked, others whispered, their prejudice laid bare for all to see. The opposing counsel, red-faced and shaken, seized the opportunity, mocking Marcus's youth, belittling his voice, twisting his confidence into attitude. What should have been a moment of triumph became an avalanche of ridicule. Marcus's chest tightened. For a fleeting second, doubt clawed its way in. Was he foolish to believe he could stand here, in this place not built for people like him? His fists clenched, his eyes burned, but his voice refused to break. Because he knew this wasn't just about him. It was about every young black man who had been silenced, every child told they weren't good enough, every dream crushed before it had a chance to grow. And then, in the midst of that storm, Marcus did the unthinkable. He refused to sit down. He stood taller. His final words rang through the room, not as a plea, but as a challenge. His truth was undeniable, and it left the courtroom stunned into silence. But silence isn't victory. The question that hung in the air was heavier than any gavel strike. Would justice honor his brilliance, or would prejudice bury it?
The courtroom never forgot that day. Some would remember it as the moment a young black teenager shattered their assumptions, while others would cling to their prejudice, unwilling to accept what they had witnessed. The judge, cornered by Marcus's brilliance, could not dismiss him outright. Instead, he delivered a reluctant acknowledgement, thin, cold, and laced with disdain. But even that hollow recognition could not erase what everyone in that room had seen with their own eyes. A boy they mocked had stood as an equal among professionals. For Marcus, the sting of humiliation lingered, but so did the fire. He walked out of that courtroom changed, not broken, but sharper. He knew the fight for justice was larger than one case or one moment. It was the fight of every young person told they don't belong, every dreamer forced to prove their worth twice over simply because of the color of their skin. The whispers of doubt would never fully disappear, but Marcus had tasted something greater. He had shown the truth. His presence in that courtroom wasn't just defiance, it was a declaration. And though the judge's smirk might have returned, it no longer carried the same weight. Because Marcus had revealed a flaw in the system too obvious to ignore. Prejudice blinds, and when it blinds the powerful, justice itself is at risk. And so his story doesn't end with a gavel, but with a question that echoes far beyond the walls of any courtroom. How many Marcuses are silenced before they get the chance to be heard? How many brilliant minds are overlooked, dismissed, or crushed under the weight of stereotypes? The answer lies not in the system alone, but in us. Whether we choose to see beyond prejudice, or whether we continue to let it dictate who is worthy of being heard. Because in the end, justice isn't about who holds the gavel. It's about who we choose to listen